All right, welcome everyone. Let's dive deep into something I bet you think you know a lot about already. The origins of Christmas.
Very sure.
We've got a whole bunch of YouTube videos here just looking at Christmas from every angle. You got religious stuff, historical stuff, symbolic stuff, you name it. We're going way beyond just the typical nativity scene here, folks.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of wild, actually, how much of what we just think of as Christmas, like regular Christmas, actually goes way, way back, like centuries before Christianity was even a thing.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we're talking like way before baby Jesus. What was going on back then?
All right, so picture this, way, way back, like long before Christianity, all these different cultures all over the world, they were already celebrating the winter solstice. And you gotta think, back then, no electricity, right? So when the sun started going away, that was seriously scary stuff. Like, would it ever come back,
Yeah, no kidding. Makes sense that they'd be worried.
Exactly. That shortest day of the year, the solstice, it was like the sun was dying and they needed it to come back. So it was super intense, but also there was this hope that the sun would come back to life.
Yeah. Anxiety and anticipation all rolled into one.
Yeah, that's it. And to mark this whole turning point, different cultures came up with all these different festivals, and man, they were full of all this symbolism, all these rituals. Like, you take the Norse, for example. They celebrated Yule, right, with these massive bonfires, and they'd burn these special Yule logs, all meant to, like, symbolize the sun coming back and driving away all the darkness.
Huh. Yule logs. So that's where that comes from. Never knew that.
Yeah, totally. And then you've got the ancient Romans. They had Saturnalia.
Saturnalia. Yeah, Saturnalia. I feel like I've heard of that. Wasn't that like a massive party or something?
Oh, yeah. It was like a month-long party, basically. Wild feasts. Everybody's switching social roles. Like, the world's upside down. And, of course, tons gifts.
It sounds a bit like a Roman version of like those crazy office holiday parties, but like way more extreme.
Exactly. Totally out of control, probably. But the thing is, these crazy celebrations, they show us that even, like, thousands of years ago, we humans, we needed to party, to celebrate, especially when things were dark and scary. And that's something Christmas still does for us today, right? Connects us to that deep human need.
I totally see that. So they were already decorating, feasting, and giving gifts way back then. Humans just got to celebrate, especially when it's the darkest time of year, right?
Exactly. It's like it's built into us.
But how did those celebrations change over time? How did Christianity come into the picture and shape things into the Christmas we know?
That's the big question, right? And this is where it gets kind of interesting and controversial. As Christianity started spreading, the early church, they had this dilemma. What do they do about these pagan festivals? They were like super popular, totally woven into the culture. Do you just reject them completely, or do you find some way to transform them?
Man, that's a tough one. What'd they end up doing?
Well, getting folks to convert to Christianity, it wasn't easy. People were super attached to their traditions, especially the ones tied to the solstice. So imagine you're the Pope, like Pope Gregory back in the 6th century, right? You get this letter from Augustine of Canterbury, this missionary over in England, and he's having a tough time converting folks because they just won't give up their midwinter festivals.
Yeah, tough situation. Can't really blame them, can you? Those celebrations were probably pretty ingrained. But also, you got to spread the word, get folks on board with Christianity.
Exactly. And you know what Pope Gregory said? He basically said, if you can't beat them, join them. He told Augustine, like, blend Christian teachings with those traditions. Make them work together.
Wow, that's pretty clever. But I could see how that would be controversial, right? Not everyone was on board with mixing pagan and Christian stuff.
You're right. It was super controversial. Some folks thought it was totally wrong, like you're watering down the faith. And actually, there were times when people tried to ban Christmas completely, but in the end, this mixing of traditions, it won out. And that's how we ended up with December 25th as the official day to celebrate Jesus' birthday.
Hold on, December 25th? Isn't there a lot of debate about whether that's actually Jesus' birthday?
Yeah, that's another big mystery about Christmas. The Bible doesn't actually say when Jesus was born, so why December 25th? Well, think about it. That date was already jam-packed with huge celebrations. You had Saturnalia, and then there was this other one, the celebration of Sol Invictus.
Sol Invictus. What's that? I've never heard of that one.
That was the Roman sun god. And his big festival was on December 25th, like a major deal in the Roman Empire. So by choosing that date for Christmas, the church, they kind of connected Jesus with this whole idea of the sun, the light that beats the darkness, the unconquerable sun. Smart move, right? Made it easier for new converts who were already used to celebrating on that day.
So it was practical, but it was also symbolic. Linking Jesus with all that light and renewal stuff, I could see that. But people weren't too happy about that, right?
Oh, yeah, some folks were really upset. They thought it was way too close to paganism, too much of a compromise. And like I said, there were actually times when Christmas got banned.
Banned Christmas. Seriously, what happened there?
Oh, yeah, for real. One of the most famous examples is the Puritans back in 17th century England and America. Super devout folks. They thought Christmas was way too pagan, way too much fun, too many distractions from, like, real religious stuff. So they outlawed it. They actually thought it was an insult to God to be celebrating on a day that had all these pagan connections.
Wow, they really meant business. My grandma would have loved them. She always said Christmas was too much about the presents and not enough about Jesus. But those bans didn't last, did they?
Nope, they didn't. And that just shows how powerful those ancient traditions are. And, that human need to celebrate, especially in the darkest part of the year, it's like nothing can stop it.
I hear you. So we've got these ancient cultures marking the solstice, then Christianity coming in and adapting things. But it's amazing how many of that old stuff is still around in Christmas today.
It really is. Like, think about the evergreen tree, right? Long before it was the center of attention in people's homes at Christmas, evergreens meant something totally different to pagan cultures.
Oh, yeah, tell me about that. What's the story with the tree?
Yeah. So for the Norse and Saxons, those evergreen trees, they were like a symbol of the Trinity in their beliefs. Represented life, that it keeps going even when it's freezing and dark out there.
Whoa, really? So my Christmas tree isn't even a Christian symbol. It's like a pagan thing that got, adopted?
Exactly. It got absorbed into Christmas. And it's not just the tree either. Think about mistletoe. Nowadays, it's all romantic, kissing under the mistletoe. But its history is way more complicated than that.
Oh, yeah. Mistletoe. I always thought that was just a romantic thing. What else is there to it?
Oh, man. Ancient cultures, the Celts, the Druids, they thought mistletoe was like magic, kept evil spirits away, brought good luck. Plus, it stayed green all winter, right? So it was tied to fertility, new life, all that.
Wow, from scary spirits to love and kisses. That little plant's been through a lot. And what about holly? I see that everywhere around the holidays. Those spiky leaves and red berries, but I never knew where that came from.
Holly's another good one. Pagans thought it was protective, like kept lightning away, bad spirits too. But then later on, Christian gave it a whole new meaning. The sharp leaves, they said that was like Jesus's crown of thorns. And the red berries, that was his blood.
So it's evergreens, mistletoe, holly. They all started with the pagans and then got kind of like Christianized over time, huh? Christmas is like this crazy mix of stuff from all over the place.
It really is. It's evolved over centuries,
Speaking of evolved in, what about Santa Claus? Everybody loves Santa. But where did that jolly old elf come from?
Okay, now that's a wild story. We got to go way back to Norse mythology for this one. Get ready to meet Odin.
Odin, like the Norse god Odin. What's he got to do with Santa?
Okay, so Odin, he was this super powerful god, king of the gods, basically. And they'd show him riding this 8-legged horse across the sky in winter. Sleipnir was its name.
8 legs. Whoa, okay. That's pretty out there.
Right, and this ride, they called it the Wild Hunt. Like all these odds and spirits, they just sweep across the night.
A wild hunt. Sounds a bit intense for Christmas, don't you think?
I know, right? But here's the thing. People believed that Odin, when he was on his wild hunt, he would leave gifts for people who, worshipped him, honored him. So you got this image of this powerful god flying through the sky, bringing gifts. Sound familiar?
Kind of does. A god with gifts. It's almost like a very early version of Santa.
Exactly. That's one part of where Santa comes from. But there's another piece to the puzzle, and this one's from Christianity, St. Nicholas. He was a bishop back in the 4th century, and he was famous for being super generous.
St. Nicholas, yeah, okay. Remind me, what was he known for again?
Oh, he was like the king of kindness, always helping people, especially kids. There are all these stories about him doing good deeds, but one of the most famous ones is about these 3 poor sisters. They were going to be sold into slavery because they didn't have any money for a dowry.
Oh, wow, that's awful.
Right. But St. Nicholas, he heard about it, and he secretly gave them the money they needed so they could get married and avoid being slaves.
Wow, that's incredibly generous. So how did this St. Nicholas guy, who sounds like a really great guy, how did he get tied up with Christmas?
Well, his special day, his feast day, was December 6th. And that was already a big celebration in Europe, especially in the Netherlands. And over time, those stories about him giving gifts and being so kind, they started mixing with all the older traditions about a magical being who brings presents in the wintertime.
Oh, wow. So you've got Odin flying around with gifts, and you've got St. Nicholas being super charitable. It's like they were meant to combine.
I know, right? And they did. By the Middle Ages, St. Nicholas was like a superstar in Europe. Often they'd show him in a red robes, bringing gifts to kids on his feast day. And as he got more and more popular, he became known as Sinterklaas in the Netherlands.
Sinterklaas. Wait a minute, isn't that where we get the name Santa Claus?
Bingo. When the Dutch folks came over to America, they brought their Sinterklaas traditions with them, and over time, that name, it kind of morphed into Santa Claus.
That is so cool. So the Santa we know today, he's like this crazy mix of a Norse god and a Christian saint. That's wild. But what about all the other stuff? You know, the reindeer, the sleigh, going down the chimney. Where did all that come from? Yeah, that is wild. I never would have guessed. But those other details, you know, the reindeer, the sleigh, go down the chimney, that stuff seems pretty far from Odin and St. Nicholas.
Yeah, well, those parts, they kind of developed over time, like a mix of folklore, old traditions, and some good old imagination thrown in there. Remember Odin's horse, Sleipnir, 8 legs, and all that?
Hard to forget that image.
Right, so that plus all these other stories about flying preachers, magic horses, it all kind of blended together, and eventually you get Santa's sleigh and reindeer.
So Odin's 8-legged horse is kind of like the great-great-grandpappy of Santa's sleigh? That's hilarious. And what about those reindeer? How'd they get into the mix?
Well, reindeer, I mean, they were perfect for it, right? Already connected to winter, snow, the North Pole. Perfect for a magical dude coming from the north. Plus, you gotta have the flying sleigh. It's all part of the magic.
Yeah, that's true. Gotta have that magic. But going down the chimney, that's always kind of freaked me out a little. Like Santa just coming in your house like that.
Huh. I can see why. But that actually comes from folklore, too. You know, those darker versions of the Wild Hunt?
Darker versions. I thought it was already pretty intense with Odin and all those spirits flying around. What could be darker than that?
Well, in some places, they didn't think of the Wild Hunt as, like, a good thing. They thought it was terrifying. Like a bunch of ghosts and demons led by Odin, sweeping through, bringing bad luck, maybe even death.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely creepier. But what's that got to do with Santa and chimneys?
Well, in those darker stories, they thought the chimney was like a doorway between worlds, a way for those supernatural beings to get into your house. Kind of scary, right?
Yeah, a little bit. So the chimney went from being this symbol of fear to like Santa's entrance? That's quite a change.
Right. It shows how symbols can change meaning over time, right? And it shows how Christmas has this kind of double side to it. Light and dark, hope and fear, generosity, and sometimes maybe a bit too much of everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you know what? I bet Santa's story isn't even finished changing. I mean, just look at how he's becoming more diverse and inclusive these days.
You're right, Santa's always evolving. It's kind of cool, right? Reflecting how our culture is changing, too.
Makes you wonder what Christmas and Santa will be like 100 years from now. But honestly, there's so much more to Christmas than just Santa. Like, we could do a whole deep dive on Christmas carols alone, or like what all those ornaments mean.
Oh, yeah, definitely. How much to explore. I think that's what makes learning about traditions so fascinating. It's like you get this whole new perspective on things you thought you knew.
Totally agree. So, as we wrap up this Christmas deep dive, what's the one big takeaway you hope folks remember?
I think it's that Christmas is kind of like a tapestry woven from all these different threads. It's about how we humans adapt, blend old and new, sacred and secular, all to create something special.
Yeah, taking stuff from everywhere, ancient celebrations, pagan rituals, Christian beliefs, folk tales, myths, and making something that connects with people everywhere, even centuries later. It's amazing.
Exactly. And maybe knowing all this, you'll see Christmas a little differently now. Appreciate how rich it is, how complex, and how it brings people together, even if it's just for a little while.
Love that. So next time you're hanging those lights, decorating that tree, or maybe even putting up some mistletoe, remember you're part of a tradition that goes back thousands of years.
A tradition that's been shaped by all these cultures, beliefs, and it's still changing today. It's pretty awesome when you think about it.
Definitely. And with that, we want to wish everyone a happy and thoughtful holiday season. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into this crazy world of knowledge. Until next time.
Happy holidays, everyone!